Well, thank you all for being here. You've gone through this journey and you've told me about it. Your CIO, Ann Duncan, is really hands-on when it comes to data. She's told me about the data journey that you've undertaken at the Energy Department. What has that looked like from your perspective, where you started versus where you've gotten, and how does your experience at other agencies inform the way that you're doing what you're doing at Energy, Bridget?
Okay. Like you said, Ann's taken it very serious. She brought in a chief data officer. So I started at Energy last May. He came last July. And in this time since then, much of our labs and headquarters have started adding chief data officers. So they're seeing the importance. They're understanding that AI is only going to be as good, or any of our data, based on what we're putting into the systems. And so working with Rob, our chief data officer, we're looking at how we can standardize it, because today everyone has different plans, everyone has different methods, but we need to share the data. And so not being able to replace it is one of the areas that we're working on. And from other agencies that I came from, they're looking at it a little ways too, where they've started to bring on chief data officers, but actually collaborating. So learning from ours and seeing how they're doing things over there.
You have the wrinkle of exchanging data, a lot of data, with non-governmental organizations, the labs and so on. What does that introduce into your modernization journey and also your optimization journey, try to make sure you're getting the most out of the data that you have?
It definitely increases our risk, because we are sharing not just internal within DOE, within federal government. We're doing universities. We're also doing international. So the scientific community is very excited, ready to share data, but that means we're adding that risk of bringing data into our environment. And so those are some of the areas we're working with our CISO and making sure that the security is in place and aligned for the data we bring in, but also those standards, so that someone is accountable for the data. It's not just, oh, we're bringing it in, we're using it, it's great. And so that's definitely made it a wrinkle. However, it's also opened us up to be able to collaborate more and see and learn from other people.
Trang, welcome. It's great to have you here. You are another government leader with a CIO who is really hands-on when it comes to data. Sunny Bagwalia has talked about that with me on a couple of occasions. What are the challenges that you and your team see at CBP regarding some of the issues that Bridget talked about and that we've talked about here already today about data?
Well, good morning. Well, I think everybody stole all my talking points from this morning.
No, but you can do them again.
Honestly, it's the same theme across all agencies, right? We have a lot of the same problems that we're facing today, and that is first discovering where our data is. What data do we have out there? What data assets? Where do they reside? And how do we inventory that data? And then the next thing, that once you inventory that data, how do we ensure the quality of the data? How do we ensure that, the data that we have is really good data so that it can be used for these new technology things such as AI models or anything like that, right? Because even for AI, if the data is garbage, it's going to give you a garbage model. So that's the second challenge that I face and then the third challenge that we face also is data governance. Is we have data. Great, but how do you use that data? What are the frameworks around it? What are the guardrails around it? What can people do with that data? What are some of the things that the policies we put around those databases? Where can they be stored? For how long? So those are some of the things that we need to consider as an agency. And then lastly, and most importantly to me actually, is the people aspect. And really that means educating our workforce to let them know the importance of data. Data is an asset now. We're trying to get our organization to be a more data-driven organization. And in order to do that, we need everyone in the workforce to understand their role and how data affects them. Not just the executives, not just the technical people from OIT, but our mission partners as well. How will they be using that data, and how important is that data to them? How can it help them accomplish the mission that they are looking towards?
You talked about governance, and you used the term guardrails. A lot of people use that term. Why do you think that's an apropos term to use when you're thinking about governance around something like data?
Well, because we are a mission-focused agency, I mean, our first thing is to protect the homeland, facilitate lawful trade. But the data can be not only our strong point, but also our weak points if we're not managing it correctly, if we're not using it correctly, if we're not securing it correctly. That's why we need these guardrails. They call it guardrails, but really guidelines in terms of what can be done to ensure that we are using it for the purpose that it's meant to be used, and that we're using it in such a way that we are not losing public faith and trust in us.
Mm-hmm. Katherine, welcome. It's great to see you. You were nodding pretty enthusiastically when Trang was talking about discovery. Why is that something that resonated with you about the work that you're doing at NOAA?
So NOAA is a data organization that likes to think it does science in all the best ways possible. Of course, science is our core. So discovery and the potential that our data creates on a broader scale when we're solving climate crises, when we're looking to actually really deliver more value to the public. If you all have ever seen, I don't know, your phone's gone off because you had a tornado warning or a severe thunderstorm. Yeah, that's NOAA. It's the National Weather Service. So how can our data come to not only protect more lives, but then the long-term aspects of the climate? So discoverability, we tend to create pipelines of data, hyper-manage for what we expect in the operational lineages. And I really think there's opportunities for enhanced discoverability as well as innovation. And that's really where my team is focused.
Yeah. What does innovation look like in the data discovery, the data curation and so on space look like? What does that look like?
Yeah. So data modernization starts with your IT. We're looking to cloud, most prominently not Gov Cloud. We're actually going to go commercial cloud from the standpoint that we have open data. We want to share our data. So can we tailor up to high integrity as well as high availability, meet our requirements, but also go in that direction? For discoverability, we also have the unique challenge of NOAA having a lot of different types of self-describing data formats, some very well richly described and not. So it's actually at a metadata level, which is a fun term that you get into when you talk about data, but it's the key enabler. You can either discover it or not because of how rich that metadata is. You can write your APIs in the most viable format. So there's an actual transformation that we're looking to do to, again, bring it out of this like very, I would say, low-level data flow that we have for operations to really enable more innovation at a data level just based on formats and the access through discovery.
Katherine, thanks for that insight. Osama, welcome. What do you hear among your government peers and colleagues that resonates with you as far as what you see when you talk really broadly across the enterprise of the federal government?
Yeah, I mean, I think to me, it's really cool to have such different missions represented up here today, because the data that you are going to try to harness for the problems that you're trying to solve, you're going to approach that differently based on the mission, the type of the data, and the way that data gets used. So, for example, you think about NOAA and weather data, that might be coming from, satellites and space. And so the way you collect that and then have to transmit it to a ground station, and the size and the speed and performance of that data is going to be inherently really different from, for example, CBP, where it might be, maybe law enforcement related data, and the way you're tracking or sensors on an officer who's in the field and not, maybe doesn't have connectivity, versus, in the energy world where you might be talking about a lot of really fast transactions, and the way you need to think about that differently. So I think starting with a mission and understanding what are the problems, and we've heard kind of that theme of what are the problems that we're trying to solve, but then saying, okay, well, what does that mean from a data perspective, and how do we need to architect and optimize that, not just for executing the mission, but then also on the other end of the spectrum, creating environments for us to do advanced analytics and be able to get insights from that data. Because one of the things that I think is really exciting about where we're going with kind of this data evolution and revolution that's happening right now is that it's not just about solving the problems that we're already solving today with our data, better, faster, cheaper, safer, but it's also enabling our mission and business partners with new insights and new ways to do their job with data that maybe they wouldn't have thought of using before. And I think that's really exciting. It's kind of that mission transformation.
I have one more question for you, but well, I have a lot, but one I'm going to ask now. But I want to tell you all, I do these a little bit differently than I think most people do. I would like you guys to be really involved from the beginning instead of me going on and on for 45 minutes and then giving you this little bit of time at the end. So if you have questions starting like as soon as I'm done with my next one for Osama, I encourage you to just raise your hand and get involved in the conversation. You'll be first. Thank you, because that's the hardest one, is to get somebody to go first. So kudos to that. So if there's a microphone or anything, we'll have it come up. Oh, yep, here it comes. So just if you have a question, raise your hand and the microphone will come to you. And when you ask your question, if you can tell us first who you are and who you're with so that they have a context for the question, and then just go right to the question so we can get as many people in as we can, that's great. My question for you is, you wrote recently about 3 phases that agencies should walk through: shifting to a product mindset, cloud-based data platforms, and the third one is starting with what's the business problem that somebody's trying to solve. Is there one of those that has proven to be more difficult for government organizations than the other of those 3, Osama?
Yeah, I mean, I think the cloud platform one tends to be a little bit further along, right, in the government overall journey, going to cloud. And I think using that as a parallel as you think about your data journey, I think is working well for folks right now. The big difference I'm finding between kind of the cloud infrastructure, cloud services, and the data side is the fact that more people need to have their hands on that with data, right? You got to have the business and the mission more involved, right? Security more involved, IT more involved, policy more involved, and all those stakeholders, I think, adds a little bit more complexity. So it's not a one-to-one parallel of the cloud journey that a lot of our clients have been going on. To me, the one that I think is a little bit trickier is probably the product mindset. Thinking about applications and services as a product, I think, is something that a lot of our government clients are starting to be able to wrap their heads around that, because that's how they interact with Apple and Google and products in their personal lives. They understand, okay, the email service that I use is really a product, and they keep dropping new for social media. They keep dropping new features, and they're always responding and self-innovating, and they kind of understand that. But when you think about data as a product, it's a little bit different. And I think that a lot of times, it's hard for people to maybe feel like they can really own data like that, especially in the government context, because you have a lot of baton passing that happens depending on, what part of the data value chain that you're on. And so for folks to really kind of culturally feel like, oh yeah, now I can take ownership of this, and I can start listening to my customers and stakeholders about what do they need, what changes should I make, or how can I start unsolicited bring new value to them. I think that just culturally is a little bit of a mind shift for folks. That seems to be a tough one.
Katherine, Trang, Bridget, anything you want to add to what Osama said before we go to start the questions? Everybody good?
I can add one thing to that. I definitely second that. We're seeing that in energy where, yes, we have a lot of things in the cloud, but it's part of how we're doing that change management, because we have people that are like, oh, it's in the cloud, it's fine. It's like, no, we need to obtain that data. We need to move it. Or we have ones that are like, we're definitely in this cloud only, and we don't want to interact with, but I'm like, you need the data from another cloud. And some of those processes definitely still in, we call it the 80s, like they're still in the mainframe aspects versus the real time that you can get if you're able to leverage the cloud to the native capabilities.
Yeah,
cool insight. All right, name, who you're with, and the other thing is, if your question's directed to one panelist in particular, let us know who that is and go for it.
All right, Eric Kavanaugh with DM Radio, the longest running show in the world about data. As I like to say, in year 17, so we've been doing it a long time. You talked about guardrails, and I'd love any of you to comment on this. It seems to me, especially with respect to generative AI, Those guardrails are going to be in your RAG models, your retrieval augmented generation, which can be extremely sophisticated because you can design workflows around how you're hitting the LLM. So you can hit a set of policies on the way out. You can hit a set of policies on the way back. And I think that's probably going to be the answer. Would any of you comment on what you see in terms of sophisticated RAG models for enforcing data governance and data quality and data use? Go ahead.
Thanks for starting with a non-technical question. Thank you very much. Anybody want to take that?
I'll take a first stab at it. So with AI and Gen AI, I think having putting in air quotes those guardrails or the policies around responsible usage and ethical usage of AI, especially when it comes to Gen AI, is really critical for any federal agency. And that's probably why there's that executive order that came down from the president on the responsible usage of AI. It's because it's it's not a new technology, but it's a technology that's taking full force right now. And in order to ensure that we are not using it, I think a lot of times when we develop AI, we need to ensure that the AI that we're developing is actually being used for what we had intended it to be used for, right? So developing and ensuring that we have the appropriate processes and procedures in place to take a look and ensure that we don't have the biases in the model, that the model is not impeding on any civil rights or liberties or any safety issues when it comes to the public. So those are things that as an agency we need to be looking at, and we are looking at. And even before we develop any type of models, we're looking into developing, like what you said, the RAGs, the process, the procedures, and the responsible usage of AI.
If it's okay, maybe just one quick thing. I love the term guardrails because to me, the intent of that is to allow organizations to move as fast as possible without going off a cliff, right? Like just like you think about on a road. And so you want those policies to be in place to provide a spectrum where people and dev teams and data product owners can operate with some freedom and be able to experiment and do things within a certain set of confines. And so I think that's a great term when it comes to that. And then, I think the other key thing when you think about AI, especially with, again, the missions we have represented here, there's a component of this which is executing a mission and using data and AI to support executing that mission specifically. And then there's also, I think DOE is a great example of like providing data as a platform for industry and for society to be able to innovate on top of. NOAA is another great example where you're doing some of that and providing data sets. And so then when you think about AI in that context and who is using it and for what purpose, I think comes into play as well. So it becomes a tricky problem to solve.
Okay.
Katherine, Bridget, anything you want to add?
Not particularly.
He talked about the platform for artificial intelligence. When you got to energy, what did that platform look like, and what have you had to do in the meantime to build out the vision that the agency has for what you want to do with AI?
When I arrived, we had in our labs a lot of different platforms, but they were more like in the non-production, just discovering. So we actually created a discovery zone that is a DOE environment where we have Google, we've added Microsoft. It's interesting that you're mentioning commercial because we have done commercial Microsoft, and now that they have federal working, we started adding that because, again, our data is in all of the platforms, and we know that we need to be able to share across. We also know that we also are using AWS and Oracle. So we have all the clouds, but looking to make sure that we can incorporate where our data is with where our AI is going.
Excellent. Eric, great question. Thanks for starting us off. Who's next? Anybody in the audience have another one? Right back here. Welcome. You're making my job easy, by the way. I appreciate
Thank you. My name is Dave Anderson. I'm with Prestructure, and we're an ethical AI strategy company. And the low-hanging good concept really resonated with me. So thank you to the early panelists to bring that up. Inside your agencies, are there any new projects that highlight low-hanging good that can build trust with citizens and residents that you're serving?
That's a great question. this strikes me there's probably a lot of examples like that, and your challenge might be, Katherine, to tell people that that's what's happening more so than anything else, because you've been doing these kinds of things for so long and now just have these amazing new tools to be able to do those things.
Yep, I'm going to answer that one. Yes, we're moving forward with some of our AI workflows, really focused on blending of different data sets that were impossible to blend in the past. I can think of this one, TC primed, may not mean much to you, but in terms of blending satellite historical data plus model data plus outcomes can result in better forecasts. So we are working in that world. I think why it's just a challenge for us is our data is in silos of beautiful excellence, but things that hasn't come together meaningfully. So we have to actually, because we don't have our IT modernization fully in place and searchable, discoverable to be able to do AI, we're having to cherry pick a little bit to pick some great examples of what could be and use those to catalyze the future. We're also doing a lot of AI-based weather modeling. You may have heard that there's some industry working in that world. So NOAA, as the predominant organization building our nation's weather models, is moving to an AI-ready approach to that, as well as an AI model where we could do faster, less expensive in terms of compute forecasts. The challenge with it is you bake in the errors, right? You're baking in the errors of whatever model you're using to train that data. And so that is going to be our challenge, is how do we incorporate AI into our operational workflows to reduce that compute, but also to alleviate the errors.
Maybe a quick add to that is I think some of the best social good kind of happens at the intersection of multiple domains and agencies' missions. So you think about, food and nutrition data overlaid with a map and, zeitgeist type information and socioeconomic information. And then you add weather patterns and you can look at, hey, who's going to be potentially most affected over a certain time horizon based on weather patterns and things like that. And it's like sort of where the intersection of agencies meets. I think there's some really great opportunities. So I'm hopeful for, and Booz Allen has sponsored a few hackathons over the last year, just even engaging with universities and some of our staff on the weekend with their free time because they're passionate about it, but bringing some of those kinds of different data sets together and giving them opportunities to ideate and come up with prototypes of the applications and things like that could help. But I think that's something I'm excited about, kind of as agencies get this base level of platform and maturity, then, and again, we talked a lot about like inter-organization sharing and interoperability. As we start to solve that more on a broader scale, I think there's some really exciting things that we'll be able to do, and it'll come through government innovation and industry innovation and kind of that partnership together.
I want to come back to that, but I want to see if Bridget or Trang have anything you want to add in response to that question.
I would add quickly that, again, we have the silos and data, and one of the areas we're looking is for the customers to know where our grants are. And so we are layering it with the states because we do have, if you go to our website, there's grants, but you would have to know, like, is it in this group or a specific office? So working with our public affairs is how we can make that more accessible, because the average person doesn't have like 30 minutes to go through our site, or is it EPA or is it IRS? Like, so even working with some of our federal counterparts is to make it easier to get some of the help that there's out there.
Mm-hmm. Anything you want to add?
I just want to add on, like, they're absolutely correct. Data silos is a challenge that all federal agencies or most federal agencies are facing, including CBP. And I think that's why it's so important to have the data discovery and try to figure out where those data resides, who we're sharing that data with, and pretty much inventorying what we have so that we can get rid of duplications and being able to manage that data better so that we can better meet the mission. Because if there's lots of data out there that aren't speaking to each other when they should be, we should try to resolve that. But first, that comes with trying to discover where that data is.
And I imagine inside an agency like DHS, that becomes even more complex, because you're not just thinking about CBP, you're thinking about the other 20-some components too. And there's value, I imagine, in some of the data that you have for the Coast Guard, and the Coast Guard has data that's interesting to you, and so on. We could go throughout all those permutations if we want.
Oh, absolutely. We do share data amongst the components. And that's the other thing is that we need to know exactly where our data is in order to appropriately share the appropriate data with our components to make it more useful for them, to help them with their mission space.
Okay. Next question, raise your hands and the microphone will come. And while you're deciding that you're going to ask your question, I want to ask you, Katherine, you've talked a couple of times now about IT modernization. What's your sense of where you are in that journey to get to where you want to be, to eliminate those cylinders of excellence, which is a term I love, by the way.
So good. I saw a graphic of silos.
It's funny because it's true, as Homer Simpson
made me
says.
happy. We are well along the way. NOAA is a band of multiple organizations, just as most federal agencies are. And I think we're getting to the point where we realize the interoperability and necessity, the dependencies of our data across all of our workflows, and using that as actually a catalyst to think through what's possible, what can we do. My organization is leading in enterprise IT development. So not only did we look at, all right, let's just set aside some of our legacy systems, let's bring them all together, but let's also bring the data together, but let's also do it in the cloud. So we just decided to go in a step function because we know we can't sustain business as it is today, and continuing to invest in bigger and bigger pipes between our systems isn't going to work. So if you put data at the center of your architecture and you think about people accessing the data and the patterns for it, that can actually enable a different view of IT modernization that I think is fundamental in a positive way for catalyzing change.
All right. Next question is from me, it looks like. Osama, you were talking about the desire to exchange data. And one of the things that has gotten management experts completely separated from IT experts excited is, I think you all know how much time we've spent in the government community over the last however many years, thinking about reorganizations of different agencies, of moving some bureau from one agency to another, and all of that. And one of the things that is at least on the mind strategically of management experts is when we get to a state that all of you, 4 of you, have talked about, that might not be necessary at some future point, because the data that needs to be shared among each of those organizations that would cause someone to say, well, this box should be on this tree instead of on this one, that won't matter anymore, because I'll be able to send that stuff to Bridget. Doesn't matter. She can be at Energy and I can be at some complete different organization. Is that, how far are we technologically from that vision, do you think, Osama?
I mean, from a data technology perspective, I think we're on the path towards that for sure. I think, especially with kind of the rise of sort of data mesh-based architectures that allow you to kind of keep data where it kind of most naturally comes into an organization and kind of optimize there, but then have access to that and be able to abstract it and ask for it and have a kind of a controller to say, hey, does this make sense? Is the rules okay? Does this person have the right access and security and the roles, and what are they trying to do with it? And then even on, like, for example, like the defense and intel side, there's some pretty, leading technology capabilities that are even allow you to follow that through, so that even if something changes and you're like, oh, you know what, we need to pull that back, they're starting to be able to do that as well, through watermarking and things like that. So technologically, I think we're for sure on the way there. I think it gets back to kind of the people and the culture side of it. I think that's going to be, and really for all IT modernization we've seen over the last decade, right? That's sort of the long pole in the tent is getting the people and the culture to kind of be comfortable with new ways of working and doing things. But I'm excited that having some folks pave the way and show the pattern and seeing the outcomes of what you can do and how much faster and how much more mission transformation you can have with taking advantage of some of these technological innovations, I think will hopefully pave the way for that transformation to go faster.
Anyone? Go. You might as well go again. I mean, you got a gig. So
Thank you so much. So you probably know these large language models, what they do is they convert text into numeric values, right? Actually vectors. That's why they talk about embeddings being vectors. It's a point and a line, basically. And then you do these similarity searches, and that's how it actually fills out the text to predict. Well, several of you have talked about silos and the challenges of silos. We know all about this. Data warehousing was invented to be able to hack through the silos and get some clean view of what's happening across information systems. And it seems to me these large language models can kind of fill that gap, but again, with the proper guardrails, with the proper embeddings, et cetera. But you talk about the different silos. If you vectorize these silos, then you have a sort of overlay of the large language model, and now you've enabled text conversations with all this data. So where I'm kind of going with this is that we've spent so much time and money over the past 40 years moving data around, all this ETL stuff, moving huge amounts of data from this system to that system, this system to that system. I think that's going to go away with this new model of being able to query massive numbers of data sets. You think about what these, like ChatGPT has been trained on. So I just want to get your thoughts on that. And then the other side is the transparency. ChatGPT is now a black box, whereas Llama 2 is open source. Are there concerns about leveraging black box technologies like ChatGPT because we don't know how it works? And even for the ones that are open source, the people I know who really know this stuff, they'll tell you, like Osama Fayyad, he runs the Institute for Experiential AI at Northeastern. He says, these models are too big. They're not supposed to work. Nobody knows why they're working. He actually says this. It's kind of funny. So what do you think about large language models kind of solving with guardrails and RAG this whole data silo problem that everyone has talked about? And then what do you think about transparency?
Thank you for that. Anybody want to take that? And I have a follow-on to that too, actually.
Sure. Well, great question. We're talking silos. So I think, at least for our workflows, our challenge, the silos don't come because we liked building silos. Where's Congress appropriating money? And the culture of I own it end to end has permeated into specific systems. So this is a challenge that I don't think we'll be able to fundamentally overcome with natural language processing. However, access, we talked about data meshes. Thank you, Osama. I think when it comes to the accessibility of data, where to find it, how to bring it, what does it have in it, that is fundamental. I can think of a great example, rain. What are other words we use for rain? Precipitation, drizzle, moisture. Could all mean the same thing. The advent of natural language processing has actually disrupted that in a positive way, so long as we have the self-description within the data to understand that they're connected. That vectorization is so key. Now, if we want to actually change, because I go back to that operational mindset, ours is about huge amounts of processing, right? It's a lot of array and Fourier transforms, and we can go into all the mathematics with smarter people. But I think the language processing to bring it together is valuable. So I see a really public access facing side of it as key. And then internally, I would think we could actually use not natural language processing, but AI and ML to modularize and actually abstract smaller parts of the data that would have been mathematical models internally.
If either of you want to add anything to that, that's great. And I'm also curious where you are both infrastructure-wise, and the other piece of this that everybody's talked about is culture, where you think you are as far as being able to bust whatever silos still exist in your organization. So either of you want to follow on to that question?
So to answer your question about infrastructure and silos and culture, I think we're still at we just hired a CDO last year. So, the organization is starting to realize the data is important. So with that being said, we're still at our infancy phase, meaning we're still educating our workforce in terms of how they can use data, how they can leverage data, how they can use data for AI, ML, and large language models, how those can help out, right? So having to educate the workforce, and I don't want to say the culture shift almost, because the most important thing to CBP right now is meeting our mission, being able to protect the borders, facilitate trade. But in order to do that, I think what we find out within our organization and we're going to have to do is remind folks of you can use data, you can use technology such as AI ML to help make it more efficient and effective for you. So imagine being an officer or an agent out in the field and having at the palm of your hand something that can tell you, and detect to say, hey, that's not an animal crossing the border. That actually is a person. You should be looking at that corner of the border to see if it's a foe or a friend or whatever it is, right? Instead of having them waiting for that data to come back and forth. So with that, we're bringing more of the technology to the edge for officers and agents in order for them to be able to use it. But that entails them understanding the importance of it, understanding the usage of it, understanding the data, understanding that the technology can help them along the way.
Okay, there's more there I want to dig into. Do either of you want to add anything on?
I would say with us, it is definitely everyone's admitted that we do need to share the data. And part of the pieces is that we don't have today an enterprise-wide data structure. And so we are working on like that data catalog, the data structure of how we're going to govern our data across the enterprise. But because we have a lot of different components that have already started the journey, so it's more of meshing together how and where they are to meet where we can go from it. So we are looking at ways to use AI to help speed that process up. Right now, we're starting with our human resources. So a lot of areas, it's humans have to come into the agency, how we can standardize that. Because today we have like 4 different paths. And so owning, okay, let's have a path that's simpler, but then we also can share the data across. So we have owned that, and we're starting to look, and then also working with a few other agencies that see, wait, your HR modernization has started. We need to do that as well, how we can learn from you.
How big of a hill was it to climb to get everybody to admit that the data should be shareable? Because that not every agency has had an easy time with that.
Luckily, Anne had already started that before I got there, and it was more of we can't continue with the old processes because we're still using, even though we are in the cloud, it was a lift and shift. It was an improvement. So it's still doing the mainframe batches, but just in the cloud. So saying we're going to modernize, not just move it to the cloud, was the first step. And then once they're noticing that, hey, we can make decisions quicker if it is more accessible and shared versus still doing the manual uploads for data, that we can do the APIs and have some of the real time. So it was a shift, I would say probably at least a couple of years. Luckily for me, I came in where they've already accepted the reality.
That's right.
So we can just implement it.
Well, and it sounds to me like part of the issue there is leadership, because you used a phrase that I think is interesting. You said at some point, whether it was Ann or somebody else, somebody had to say, this is just how we're going to do it. We don't have time to survey everybody anymore and decide what people want to do. This is how we're going to move forward. You're nodding your head pretty enthusiastically over there, Osama, when I say that.
Yeah, I mean, I think leadership, top-down buy-in is critical for any big, transformative culture change like this. I think the part that really kind of hit me in the heart was when you're talking about kind of the trust. And one of the things that I'm finding that's a challenge culturally for a lot of the organizations that I work with is the idea that when we go to this new, paradigm where we're using enterprise data instead of me, using just this pocket of data, I get the benefit of these other insights that maybe I didn't have yet. But then that means that I've got to let go of this and give this to the mothership, right? And I have to know that when I really need a piece of data for my mission, which is critical, that I'm going to get that data in a timely manner, and it's going to be accurate, and it's going to be managed well, and I can trust it to make my decision. That's the part that I think, and it's coming from a good place, right? Our government partners, they want to do their mission really well, and so that's why it's harder to let go of something, because and you're like, I have to trust you that you're going to take care of that and get it to me when I need it in the way that I need it. And I think that's the kind of cultural piece that we're going to be probably working with, a lot of our clients probably the next 12 to 18 months. That's going to be the big cultural mountain we're going to be climbing.
Have you seen government organizations, whether it's federal or others, have you seen government organizations make that cultural shift? And if so, what have they done? Where have they started to lay the groundwork to then be able to build on to get to that state that you just described?
Yeah, I mean, actually, he was up here earlier, but I think Sagar's organization at GSA is making some great progress towards that right now. And it's really, they're riding on the back of the credibility that the IT organization has made. in terms of the IT modernization work that's been done and saying, look, we're delivering your applications, we're delivering new services, we've built a credibility, you trusted us with that. Now, if you give us this data, we're going to continue to build on that trust that we've done, and we're going to give you these new insights, this new value. We're going to reduce the cost for you to manage this data, things like that. So I think that's a great example of where we're seeing that trust being built and being able. It's got to be on the back of other trust building that's happening in the organization. That
model at GSA in general, but FAST in particular, is interesting to me too because of the context there. So GSA's CIO is very highly regarded, Dave Shive, been there for a long time, knows the organization inside and out. But the last FAST commissioner was Sonny Hashmi, who had been the CIO there before. So he had a lot of background also when it comes to the technology side, and then was able to go into that organization and say on day one, as we've talked about leadership, this is how we're going to do it from now on. And Julie Dunn, who was commissioner before Sonny, and Alan Thomas before her, had kind of already started that process too. They had said data is going to be valuable to us. And then Sonny was able to go in and say, yeah, this isn't stopping. This is going to continue. Is that maybe issue one for people like the other folks that are up here with us today, that they and their colleagues who are in leadership are able to say, we're moving forward in this way, and you can come along and join us, but not really leave a lot of space, a lot of margin?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I think, look, it doesn't need to be more stick than carrot.
Sure.
Right. But I think, the example that you just use is perfect, because when you have somebody who comes in and says, I understand the value, and I'm going to bring IT and give them a seat at the table with the business, with security, with the mission, and we're going to work together and chart this path forward. I think that's where it really kind of paves the highway for increasing the speed and the velocity of transformation, versus sort of like, hey, IT works for the business and it's a subservient relationship, or like, I will tell you what I need, but I'm not looking to you to tell me how to do the mission, right? When there's that partnership and exchange, and I think even in one of the earlier sessions, right, they were talking about innovation. I think it was John Larson was saying, innovation is a job of everybody. Mm-hmm. And so I think when you kind of really bring everybody together like that's a big catalyst for change.
And I think what you're getting at there is something I don't know firsthand. I don't know personally about CBP and NOAA, but I know personally firsthand at Energy that Ann has that kind of trust for you to be able to just go and do those things, and knows that what you execute is going to fit with the vision that she has more broadly for the organization, in the same way that we just talked about GSA, where Sonny said to folks, you go do this, and I know you're going to do what we have in mind.
Yes, that is accurate. And she has support from our deputy secretary. Mm-hmm. And as we do those reports up, it's, Bridget's working with science, who's working with our nuclear regulatory on different elements, because it's the business and IT versus, it's the business. And if they would like to, they can work with IT, and that it's a partnership for us to be successful. Yeah. But part of the pieces is that delivering, and it's almost like our business proposition. Like, we won't mess it up if you let us be your system owner, because everyone's had their own systems. But we're like, if we manage it, we're going to do your security, we're going to do your privacy, we're going to have your data, and you can focus on your mission. And that is like that trust aspect. And we're constantly keep reinvigorating and keep giving those touch points so that they see that it's something that we can partnership with.
Excellent. Anybody out here? Have I missed one? Yes, ma'am. Mike is coming. And name and who you're with and who your question is directed to, if anyone in particular.
Hi, morning. My name is Prachi Suktankar. I'm one of the leaders within Booz Allen's climate and infrastructure practice. Thank you for a great conversation today. Really appreciate it. I've heard about the whole data lifecycle from acquisition to dissemination. You all started talking about some of the key barriers. And I started hearing a touch around some of the transformational techniques or technologies that might really be game-changing here. So my question is, there is no silver bullet to some of this, right? I mean, it's that thoughtful work, it's that hard work, it's looking at all of those different barriers and techniques. Having said that, to really accelerate the transformation within your mission, do you feel like maybe there is a single lever or maybe a couple of levers that you wish you had that might really accelerate the transformation for the mission outcomes that you are looking for? So, for example, it could be technologies, whether that's Gen AI, data mesh, whatever, or it could be something completely non-technological that's perhaps outside of your agency and your charter. So just curious about that.
Excellent question. Thanks for that. Wish lists.
Wish lists?
Yeah, that's right.
Well, I think we're fortunate enough to have top-down support in terms of technology and what is needed for the mission. And we do have mission partner support. In the past, a lot of agencies refer to our business component as customers, right? It's now, we are no longer, OIT, the technology end is no longer looking at our mission partners or mission individuals as customers, but we're really, the theme here is mission partners, right? And then what Sunny Bagwell, our CIO, has done is he's established what's called trusted partner initiatives, where we meet with each of the mission partners to kind of figure out, what do you need? What can OIT do to help push your mission forward and make your mission a little bit more effective and efficient? So one of the things, I'm going to say it, but, this is probably from Trang, probably not any other government agency, so please don't quote me on this one. But what we need, not only support from our trust partners and, mission top down, but the resources in order to accomplish our mission. There never can be enough resources. When I'm talking about funding, I'm talking about individuals to help out, because there's lots that we can do, but we can only prioritize so much based upon the resources that we have. So first on my list is probably going to be the necessary resources that we need in order to accomplish what we need. And then the second thing is helping everyone to understand, comes back to that culture and the data shift and the paradigm shift of the technology. Having everyone understand and change the culture a little bit here. And I know you talked about the culture in terms of making sure that we are no longer siloed and we're able to share data. And, data, it's no longer the me monster. And that started, for us with developing a data strategy. And that data strategy is kind of corralling everybody together to say, okay, we have a common understanding. And now, I just want everybody to understand and pretty much work towards the common goal of what's in the data strategy in order to make data more of an asset to them than a liability, make data more useful to them in order for them to accomplish their mission a little bit more efficient and effective so that they're not out there, and let them know that they're not alone and they should not be afraid of technology and they should not be afraid of the change that's out there. So I think those are my two biggest things is, not only the resources that's needed in order for us to accomplish our mission, but for everyone to understand and realize, get a little bit more educated in terms of the usage of data, the usage of the technology, and how we can be a leverage for them versus a liability, how we can be an asset.
I want to give you a chance to talk about your wish list too in answer to the question, but you used that word liability twice in, I think, an interesting way. I don't know that I've ever heard anybody describe the possibility that some rank and file person in an agency might think of data as a liability. I would think it would just be either an asset or neutral. Don't even think about it or care about it that much. Is that a thing, or is it just something that you're aware of that you're trying to avoid?
This is something that we're trying to avoid.
Okay.
I don't think it's a thing per se. I just don't want people to think that, the technology, not necessarily the data, but the technology is the hindrance on their current ways of doing things, right? More that the technology is not something that's going to stop them from doing something. The technology is not something that's going to take away their job, but rather the technology is more of something that's going to help them out. It's going to spring them forward, and it's going to be more of an asset to them. Because I think one of the common themes that I've heard a lot of my peers talk about when they want to use AI, or even not just the federal, but in the private sector, is that AI can replace the job. AI is not going to replace jobs. AI is going to make things better, more efficient, so you can concentrate on doing something that your core job ought to be. Like in our case, it's actually law enforcement, right? So we're doing mundane things, like looking at spreadsheets. Instead of having RPA take a look and process things for us, then we're not concentrating the bulk of our time on something we should be doing, such as law enforcement activities. Yeah. So more not considering it as a liability, but more considering technology as an asset that you can use to spring forward.
Yeah, lower value work to higher value work, I think, is the language that was in the President's management agenda. Yes. What's on your wish list, Bridget?
Mine's resources as well. In the government, our budget process is 2 years in advance. So 2 years ago, we may have asked for, say, $1 million for AI, because we knew it was always around. But now with the executive order and some of those items, it's like, okay, we are deprioritizing other items to comply with that mandate. The other piece for us, liability from a data, is how the bad actors, the malicious data aspects of, we have satellites, we have things that are assets that we do need to protect. But patching together, if we are using more of the open source models, that you're able to get more information than you should about some of our areas. So we're looking at it from a cyber lens to make sure the data that are put in models that are not controlled, even on the low side, is unable to be put together or used for malicious aspects.
Anything you want to give us for your wish list, Kath?
I mean, of course, money and people are fundamental here. I would say perhaps a lessons learned, and also something that is key to me, is this idea of, and you kind of hit on it with the idea of the product enablement, the product mindset. It's really an enterprise mindset. It's what can be done. And what that's doing is addressing control. Control, I think, is a fundamental challenge in your organization. It's why people are here. They show up. I'm in charge of this. This is mine. I deliver this. And as a civil servant, you don't physically own it, right? So you're here to represent the mission. So we now have a control about mission and delivery and your value to the nation. So by getting out of that mindset of I have to do this and thinking to how can I do this better and where is the value of this, perhaps intersecting in different areas, that mentality shift, and the more that we can imbue that with our people, will enable such better solutions to come.
I'm not suggesting, Osama, that they should cut corners, but are there any techniques that you've seen organizations use to kind of compensate for what they wish they had or wish they had more of?
No, I mean, I think the things that they are saying that was on their wish list, I would say my list of clients would probably match them up pretty nicely. Maybe one thing to throw out there that wasn't mentioned explicitly that I think it kind of enables all of those things is probably around training and education. I think the more that we can get people more literate around modern data paradigms and kind of what these terms are, what they mean, so that people aren't, coming up with their own definitions of things and making, taking stances of whether they're for or against something based on that versus really kind of being educated. I think that could play a huge role kind of more broadly. And I mean that in all parts, right? The management, the business, the mission, IT, even within data organizations, the experience, the end customers, right? Like I really think education for everybody kind of helps propel everything forward as well.
Trang, you talked a couple of minutes ago about how your CDO is educating people and you and your team are educating people about data, the benefits inside the organization. How are you doing that? And how receptive are people to that education process?
Good question.
This is kind of my job.
So I think we're starting out, we've had several things such as lunch and learns, actually had an AI day, looking to do like a data day, but we're also having things not just internally within, but we're looking to talk with vendors as well, and trying to find out, what's out there, how can they help us, and vice versa. But when it comes back to our staff and educating them, it's really going out and to, Sunny's credit, having these trusted partner initiatives and being able to talk to them and try to figure out, what is it that you need, and how can I, as within the Chief Data Officer, be able to help you out? We also have a, I think it's a data working group within CBP that has representation within all of our mission partners. And we talk about things such as, data quality, data consistency, sharing of data, and all the things that is encompassed within our data strategy, and trying to figure out from them, how can we help out, and vice versa. And they've come and asked us multiple times, hey, can you just come talk to my staff here about this topic? Help them understand where they fit in. That's the key, helping them understand where they fit in. Mm-hmm. Because lots of times people do not understand where they fit in the paradigm of data and how data they just know that it's there. But because their core mission is just, helping to protect the border or facilitating trade, and it ought to be. And then my responsibility is helping them understand, how that data can help them better achieve what they need to do faster and quicker and more efficient, but reliable and secure at the same time, of course.
Bridget, that idea of where they fit in sounds almost like an architecture issue. You have your IT architecture, but is there, or maybe should there be, if there's not, a people architecture where you have very clear, not roles and responsibility, not like job descriptions exactly, but where everybody understands what their level of interaction, what their role in that interaction is when it comes to data? Or am I thinking about it too hard?
No, I think that is definitely where we're headed. Part of the pieces now is that foundational of that the data is here and how we're going to incorporate that, or it's being used in the systems. The good part about us from an IT standpoint is that our data governance is aligned in the same caveat. So we talk about our systems, we talk about our business, and we talk about like our data. Those governance boards roll up into one. So we do have those aspects, but today that is not officially a thing yet. And we know that is in the pipeline. Ideally in fiscal year 25, we're looking to have more of that role, but this year it's mainly working on foundational pieces and everyone understanding data should be something that we work on.
Yeah. Katherine, I imagine because of the number of scientists that you have and the amount of, maybe it wasn't even called data, maybe it was, over the years, I imagine you probably have a lot of people with a very high level of understanding of what that value is. Is that a fair observation on my part?
Of their data, for sure.
Yeah. So has it been then as much of an education process as it sounds like it's been for the other agencies that are represented here and more broadly across the government? Or do you think you've had maybe an easier shot at that?
In some ways, I think it's easier. We have an archive, right? So we are archiving data. There's stewardship. There's the interconnectivity of the data curation. However, I would say that when you look at the scientists, when they interact with their user community to deliver products, right? That's fundamentally our mission. The data, the readiness is so hyper tailored to who they perceive their users are. So the potential usage of data outside of that is not something that they curate because they think they're delivering the mission. So it's not necessarily data literacy. It's an expansive, it's a more broader look to what's possible and the idea of innovation. And that when you have operations sitting next to innovation, there are pushes and pulls, right? Because you have to deliver. So you need to get things out the door. But could we do it better? Could we do it in a more meaningful way? That, I think, is a little bit more of our challenge, is how do I use all this different data? How do I use the diversity to deliver more and better?
In those kinds of situations, like you just talked about, and I don't mean to pick on operations, but are they getting better at being able to say to the technologists, I wonder if we could, or would we be able to fill in the blank, whatever that is, to then have the technologists talk about, you used the term, the art of the possible. Is that happening more? Is it your sense?
I think it is. I mean, I think our IT operations are still rather constrained on premises without a lot of, because we have high performance computing without a lot of room there. So yes, it's innovation, but it's within the bounds. So if we can look to leverage more cloud and reduce that perhaps bounding box as much, I think there's more opportunity for those types of conversations.
All right. Is John still here? John, right here. Can you give him the microphone? Because I want to get you in on this too with Osama. What facilitates that from your perspective? What facilitates that combination of the tactical and strategic, the operations and the IT, to drive that innovation? The reason I'm asking you is because you made that point on the TV show earlier. But Osama, I'll have you go first. What drives that, both in quantity and quality?
I appreciate you asking me to go first. I can't just agree with John.
You never agree with me, Osama.
Yeah, probably not. I would say, I think it's a couple things. I think one, having a shared North Star. We talked a lot about strategy up here today. I think that's critical. So being able to if you got pockets of folks who are kind of moving out in their own directions for good reasons and they're trying to do the right thing. But if you can plant something that nobody's at yet, that's further out, and say, this is where we want to go as an organization, it very quickly gets everybody pointed in the same direction. They kind of have to converge. So I think that's a critical way. And then the other thing I would say is maybe this idea, and again, another kind of maybe shout out to the GSA crew, is thinking about things more as an ecosystem versus like an architecture. And enterprise architecture has evolved a lot over the past decade. But I still think we tend to think of that as more rigid, and an ecosystem is a little bit more fluid. And when you think of it like that, you can have a portion of that ecosystem responding to the customer needs or providing new experiences and changing things, and it having an impact, a ripple effect on the rest of the ecosystem, but still being able to do that kind of based on what the closest trigger or the business need is for that. I think those two things together kind of help enable kind of that operations and this tactical and the strategy to come together.
And I hope you have something besides I agree with him.
I was going to say I agree with him. No,
that's a great starting point.
Yeah, it's a great starting. I always find with Osama, if you agree with him, a good start. Here's a couple things I'll say. First of all, Katherine, I love what you said, which is like you have to be able to understand the power of these tools. I talk about the education element of this as understanding the aperture of the art of the possible. And if you can open that aperture, you now have a way to drive innovation. I talked about everyone's responsibility is innovation, but it's constrained when you don't understand the power of these tools. And so I think the education element of this and really creating what we've done internally is we've launched this large AI program. We call it AI Aware, because everyone in this institution that we're part of has an obligation to bring these solutions to our clients and understand the mission challenges and how AI is a component of that solution set. And when you make everyone aware of those capabilities, they can see the art of the possible. They can figure out how to plug in. So that's the first thing I'll say. The second thing I'll say is I do think there is an ecosystem at play here. You have to bring these problems are often, I think, too complex for one single solution. You have to bring together and integrate technology. That's kind of where I feel like we are really good at bringing together a lot of different technology players and stitching them together and engineering what I think of as at the seams of these technologies. These technologies don't work flawlessly. They need to be integrated together. You have to engineer at the seams and the last mile, whereas you're bringing that technology to that mission application, that last mile of AI to accomplish that. And so we have investment initiatives. We have a venture capital fund that we've stood up with $100 million where we are going out and we are investing in these technology companies to bring these capabilities to bridge gaps. Because I think that's the last thing I would say is that like there's enormous technology out there, but you need to understand where the gaps between that technology exist and where the mission application fits. And ask yourself, do we need to engineer that solution? Or can we go partner, buy, right, whatever that may be. And so that's what we try to do is think about that in terms of that's how you get to innovation quickly. And that's how I think you accelerate that time to mission impact with AI.
Thanks for the insight. I appreciate you jumping in unanticipated. I really appreciate all of you being here. And I'm going to wrap up in just a second, turn it back over to Katie to wrap us up. But I want to give each of you a chance to say what you didn't have a chance to say yet. Closing thought, whatever, doesn't have to be long, but Bridget, I'll start with you. Anything you want to add just to throw in there before we wrap up?
Yes, I think it is a very exciting time right now. And you had on like the other hats I wear. So I am enterprise architecture and innovation. So I have a very unique role in AI. And then I have spectrum management. I have all the titles.
Busy at all.
I don't, no, but they all are correlating and mixing today because with AI, we're able to see new tools. We're needing to be innovative, but then also protecting like our spectrum pieces. So I think it's exciting for me. I never have like a dull day, but it's the matter of picking the right tools for Department of Energy. And so that's part of the pieces that we mainly need help with is narrowing down. Yes, there's technologies, but what's best for our clients and how we can make those enterprise capabilities.
Excellent, Trang.
Well, I think I'm going to second what she says. Also, wearing multiple hats. I think that's a theme in the federal government.
Yes.
Like, but, you know, wearing the artificial intelligence, I lead the Artificial Intelligence Center of Innovation at CBP. So wearing that side of the hat, I think one of the things that it's an exciting time for sure. And, you know, I think more and more our mission partners are realizing that the technology, such as AI, such as edge computing, are going to be a game changer for them. It's going to be able to help them better meet their mission needs. And so I think having everybody understand that and having everybody corral together to be able to assist in that realm of world it is really critical for what we do. And being here during this day and time when we have this AI tsunami coming back to us, it's really fun, but scary at the same time.
In a good way.
Yes.
All right, cool. Katherine?
I'm excited about this. I think data and putting data first and thinking data in terms of sharing is the only way we're going to really be able to solve some of the major problems that have moved forward in our country and at a global level. And I'm really interested in how data and the idea of social science come to pair, because you can just give people data, but if they don't do something with it, what's the point? Mm-hmm. So I think I'm really excited about using all of your data. I don't know how CBP is going to fit in, but we'll figure it out. But bringing it together in a meaningful way to put forward solutions, because that's what we need. That's why we have so many brilliant people working on this. And then if we can bring in the social scientists, bring in the people elements, that's how real change gets affected. But it starts with data. So everything I've heard here today, everyone I've had all the great conversations with, I just leave here with a lot of hope.
Excellent. That's wonderful. Osama, final thoughts.
I think first off, thank you to our government partners and all the work that y'all are doing to help transform and take us into the future. Super appreciative of that. And thanks for y'all who are here in person today, and Francis for facilitating us. I think for me, I echo the sentiment of excitement. I would say, I think as climate shifts and changes, then our borders potentially shift and change, specifically like the natural borders. And so that becomes, there's your intersection right there. You guys can have coffee over afterwards about that. But I think, to me, just the themes about, taking a strategic view, an enterprise view, partnerships, I think are really going to be critical, and making sure that we're looking at the intersections, the seams, where innovation can occur. I think those are the things that I think be kind of good thematic takeaways from today. And it's definitely exciting times going forward.
Thank you all very much for participating. I know you are very busy, so to take your time out and come and do this morning, I appreciate. I want to thank again the Booz Allen team for having FedGov today here. April 7th is when the TV segments will be on TV. Sunday morning at 10:30 on ABC7 in Washington and YouTube all around the world. And you should subscribe, by the way, to the FedGov Today YouTube channel. There's good stuff on there. And I mean that not just in the self-serving way. I do kind of mean it that way, but not only in that way. And it's my pleasure to turn things back over to the Booz team. Katie is supposed to take things from here. And I thank you all for your attention.
And I don't feel like I need to do much closing because you guys took all my data points. which you can read on the screen that they're not going to turn on. But thank you again, panelists. We heard some really great stories across GSA, VA, Energy, CBP, NOAA today. And this is just the tip of the iceberg. We know that this is a really, this is going to be the journey that we collectively are on for years to come. And it's sort of exciting to start to see the progress that we're making, new design patterns, best practices, things that can be leveraged across. So I don't want to repeat what was just said because you all said it so well, but I'm tuning in on April 7th. I know I'm going to be watching. That's must-see TV in my household. So thank you all for attending. There is lunch. You always need food. There is lunch and time to sort of meet and greet and network with one another. So please stay and enjoy some more time and camaraderie around these subjects. Thank you. Thanks, everyone.